Welcome to Montana Whiskey, Wealth, and Freedom.
Well, I've been in love, I've been on the ground, I've gotten back on my feet, just to fall back down on my knees for you and your whiskey under the bridge.
So, great honor to have you here today, Willie.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much for coming up. And I wanted to, since we kind of we did informal introductions with you already, because I just wanted to, didn't want to make you wait and guess who you were sitting around the table with. But the most important thing, I think, as far as where we are at this point in the show today, is to really, not to make you feel uncomfortable, but to really take an opportunity to really highlight your business, your moonshine products. I mean, that's kind of, that's what we want to get into now. And so you get to be center of attention. If you're okay with that.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
He looks pretty confident over
Yeah.
there. Not
Yeah.
the way I felt
Like
the first time.
Like I said, this is not your first rodeo, right?
Yeah, and
Awesome.
it's something that, I've been working on for quite a few years now. So, it just kind of comes naturally, talking about what I do and what we do as a team and
Yeah.
how we started and the products we make. So,
Yeah, well, I think there are, again, the two most important things, just to be time sensitive, because we could probably sit here and drink moonshine and talk for multiple hours, but we want to try to keep this somewhat contained. Anything that, from an intro standpoint, wanted to just give you the opportunity just to share with us and with the audience, what it is that you would like people to know about you from an introduction standpoint.
yeah, I'm Willie Blazer. I grew up in western North Carolina and basically in the mountains. So pretty rural area. We were tobacco farmers. We had, we grew hay and potatoes and peas and had apple orchards, and we had cows and horses, and then it's almost like the Noah's Ark type thing. We had two of everything else, 2 sheep, 2 goats. We actually had a lot more goats, but chickens, and just grew up pretty rural. And that's just the way a lot of people lived there in the hills. Everybody lived off the land. My great grandpa never drove a vehicle. He had a team of oxen, that he would use to go places and things. And sometimes he would thumb a ride into town or something like that. I mean, he was born in 1895. He was a World War I veteran. He was a medic, and that might have been one of the reasons what triggered me wanting to eventually be a medic in the military, was just, thinking about him. But just salt of the earth people, everything is about family and God and faith and working the land. A lot, you see that in a lot of rural areas. And, it's just, that's moonshining, that's heart of moonshining, country, homemade brandies and wines. And, it's just a lot of this Scotch, Irish, descent from there. And they naturally brought that over when they came over here. So I can't say a lot of people in my family made it, but people did. So you grew up around it. You grew up knowing, using the byproducts, extra corn left over for the year or whatever, and, somebody be making moonshine out of it. So I kind of grew up around that. I can't say I grew up running a still or whatever, but never thought I'd be doing this, 50 years later, 40 years later, or whatever. But sometimes your past comes out. Yeah, that's where I grew up, and right after high school, went in the military, and then moved out here in 1997. Went to Missoula. Wanted to get into smoke jumping. Did that for a bit, and wildland firefighting thing. And but yeah, there's a lot to my story. But
What's funny? We almost crossed paths back in the late '90s because I was actually living in Lolo at the time. I was working on I don't know if you knew the Middies that had a ranch roping arena. That's where the University of Montana's rodeo team practiced.
okay, yeah.
And so I worked there, and I had always past that smoke jumping. Is a training center, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and I really thought long and hard about, you know, going in there and signing up and enjoying it and doing it. And I didn't, obviously, but it is kind of funny because you were there. You and I would have been there at the same time, and we would have met then. So
Yeah, probably
maybe
so.
we were it's just inevitable for our paths to cross.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's great. I mean, there's so much more. I think a lot more questions that I think are, you know, we could pick and probe quite a bit because interestingly enough, before you got here, we were talking about the whole premise of this show. So the podcast is the treasure trove, but this show specifically is called The New Frontier. So I'll do episodes every month of this show, and then we'll do another show that is a little bit more financial oriented, from a little bit more in the weeds. But this one is a little bit more philosophical, intangible, and talking about the new frontier. You know, is all about, you know, the creating a parallel between the journey that the old pioneers made, like during the Oregon Trail, journeying west to discover prosperity and new opportunity from land. This show is all about how do we recreate that opportunity and new prosperity for people as modern pioneers, but do it in a kind of more of an economic setting or environment. So it sounds like for you, and again, we just skimmed the surface with your introduction, but that you did very much take a journey. And there's, you know, you talked a lot about the beginning, the roots of the beginning of that journey. And there's probably a lot that happened between the beginning points that you shared and up to today that has been a very probably interesting, colorful journey for you with everything that you've experienced and done in your life. And hopefully over time, as we get a chance to do more conversations with you, we can get into more of that today or over time. But today we'll definitely maybe get into a little bit more of that as we go. But I do also want to make sure that we jump into talking about your wonderful moonshine products, because I know that is something that you are, from the little bit that we've learned so far, talking to Dave and talking to Glenn, it's so fascinating. You know, just a few conversations we've had already, how much we've already learned. And it's like the backdrop, the context becomes very interesting as you start to learn more and more about the products and what goes into making them. So the moonshine, let's touch on that. And I know also the branding and the bottling elements is a really rare and cool thing that you guys do. So I have the bottles in front of the other items, but please, where would you like to start?
Basically, that's kind of where we would start. You know, moonshine is kind of your basic spirit. You know, every country has it. You know, the Balkans, you know, they have their slivovitz. They use leftover plums and apples and stuff like that. You know, every country has their moonshiners. Somebody, you know, wine is made from grapes, you know, or fruit. Beer is made from barley, and you're basically making a raw beer or a wine, and you're distilling it. So you're taking it one step further, going through the whole distillation process, and then you're concentrating that alcohol, and that's where, you know, your stuff's coming out, you know, 80% alcohol, 90%, 70%, however you're running your still, and then it condenses, and, you know, you come out with this high proof stuff. You get a lot less of it. You know, you might take 100 gallons of beer and only get, you know, 1 gallon of that. You know, that's your good moonshine, your hearts. And I can go into the heads, hearts, and tails later. So it was interesting, and basically me and my late wife Robin, we'd always made our own beer and wine, and nobody was doing that in Montana. There was no distilleries at the time. We first started looking into it in around 2005. And, you know, I never wanted to be my own boss, or never was an entrepreneur. I was always, you know, working for the government, basically the military and, you know, the Forest Service, and contracting for the government, stuff like that. But I kind of got bit by the entrepreneur bug, and that was a big one. think a lot of it had to do with we just started having our girls, you know, and I was like, all right, I gotta figure out career wise. Am I going to stick with the military? Am I going to stick with fire? And just the idea kind of popped into my head, and kind of ran with it and looked into the laws in Montana, and we're like, yeah, we should do this. You know, there's quite a few breweries, a lot of people making beer, but nobody's making moonshine or whiskey or brandy. And we just started reading every book we could about, you know, starting a business and, you know, how to make this stuff, and, you know, taking a few classes here and there. We honestly didn't take that many classes. It's kind of like making moonshine, for lack of better words. It's kind of like baking a pie or something. Every oven is different, different altitudes, different ingredients, and you make something and you let your friends try it. And you just keep, you know, trying to get better with it. And moonshine, you know, kind of runs in my blood. Grew up around Popcorn Sutton, was a family friend of ours, a legendary moonshiner. I think he passed away in 2010. But there's some still old documentaries out there on him, and he was a pretty funny dude, and everybody thought he was super interesting. And I was like, well, every other older dude I grew up with was kind of like Popcorn Sutton. You know, he's not weird where we came from. You know, I mean, he's definitely an interesting character. But I was always the guy bringing moonshine back, you know, to wherever I was in the military, to Georgia or, you know, wherever. And then same with wildland firefighting. There's one guy on our crew that's from Kentucky. So me and I think his name was, Riggins, but we'd always bring moonshine back because our buddies always liked it and people wanted to drink it. And so that's where the moonshine came, and it's fairly easy to make. Mm-hmm. Basically, our Montana moonshine is our base for our bourbon. So it's corn. It's about 70% corn, 20% barley, or 20% rye, and then about 10% barley. That's kind of your standard bourbon recipe. Moonshines can be all over the map. They can be 100% sugar. They can be 100% corn. But ours is basically our bourbon recipe. But there's a lot, surprisingly, I started looking into this. There's a lot of moonshining history out west, Gold West country, mining camps. You got to think, right after the Civil War, all those Southerners moved out here, and guess what they used to drink during the Civil War, those time periods.
Yeah,
and probably not very good stuff either.
No, and that was the catch. Is like, you got what you got. It does the trick as far as getting people in a mental buzz state or whatever they were looking for to take the edge off from a hard work day or whatever. Because you can imagine a wagon train having to bring out, 5 barrels of Jack Daniels or Jim Beam or something from back there all across the plains, and how much that stuff would cost if it made it out here.
Yeah.
So why do that when you can just have the little jug, right, that you can put up on your elbow and tilt back?
Yeah. So every moonshining camp out here, Helena, Virginia City, you name it, I guarantee you there was some moonshiner there, some guy making moonshine and selling it. And Hal Pasley, older guy I met when we first got our distillery going, he was 107 when he passed in Ennis. He was born in 1910, so that means he passed, I think, 2017. But he told me a lot of moonshining history just in our Madison Valley. Talking about, he remembers when he was a kid and he was like 10 years old, and there were no lights or anything. Like, Butte had power by then, but places like Ennis didn't. And he could just see, he said he could see the flicker of lights, in a few places in the hills, and that was moonshine.
The still's going.
Yeah, the still's going. So it's kind of interesting. A lot of people don't think of moonshine out here, but there is some history to it for sure.
So the one of the things I think is so cool and unique about from a bottling standpoint is that you chose to put the labels on there by the batch, and you did certain things on your label. You recorded the temperature of the Madison River the day it was bottled.
Yeah.
The what are some
the flow rate? We'll put the flow rate of the Madison River. Ennis is a fly fishing town, so it's still a cowboy town too, but it's became known over the last, 40 years as, a fly fishing destination for sure. And I grew up fly fishing in the mountains. My mom's dad, my other grandpa taught me how to fly fish. So I've been fly fishing since I was 5. So that was one of the reasons I wanted to move to Montana. The mountains were bigger, the animals were bigger, and the fish were bigger. There's less people, So yeah, we just kind of wanted to recognize our Madison Valley and, got the fly rod on there. And, water's a big deal with Moonshine, and we got some of the best water in the world, limestone aquifer there. A lot of people think we pull our water straight out of the Madison. We don't do that, but it's from the Madison aquifer. Very good water. So the flow rate, all the fish guys, lots of times we joke and call them the fish hippies. That that's what they talk about is what's the CFS, what's the flow rate on the Madison right now? Is it 1,200 a day? Is it bumped up to 2,000? Is it dropped down to 750? So we thought it'd be kind of fun to, every time we did a batch, we'd put the batch number, the date, what the flow rate of the river was that day, and what the temperature was. So some of our bottles might have minus 30 on it, or they might have 92 degrees. So that's on both our Montana Moonshine and our Honey Moonshine.
Well, I think that's very interesting that you, one of the things, again, we're only 2 products in we did the Stockman's Rye first. And, obviously what was so neat about that one was that was more about honoring the stockman and the rancher and
right.
And that you had your branding, you did unique brandings on the bottles to honor the ranches here in Montana. And that now, with learning that with your Moonshine, that's kind of a hat tip to the fly fishing industry. And I know that as we get more down the road into promoting other products, we'll learn that every new product has a similar story as far as what it is actually oriented towards, as from a heritage honor, community standpoint, which is another one of the really cool facets I think about. I think it's one. I mean, obviously I'm biased and I'm partial, but I think it's one of the things about what you're doing with your distillery and with your products that makes you so unique and so competitive even on a national market, because it stands on its own for what it represents in so many different ways, and it's super cool, very cool. But
yeah, real funny story, because we're talking about Moonshine. So Moonshine is just a name. That's the name of the bottle, Montana Moonshine. It's, if you look on the bottle, the fine print, it says something like spirits distilled from whatever. Like the honey, it says spirits distilled from grain and honey or something like that. Because you make moonshine out here, you got quite a few Southerners. People are always bringing me their stuff. Hey, Will, you got to try this. And I won't try to go down this rabbit hole, but anytime a moonshiner gives you something to drink and it comes in a mason jar or something else,
careful.
You have them take the first sip. Learn that in
So
Afghanistan.
Might put a hole in your gut immediately.
They may be trying to poison you. Always make the locals take a sip first. But yeah, I forgot where I was going with that. But anyway, it's pretty good stuff, and our first stuff wasn't as good as it is now. But we listened to our friends and family and customers, and you can only refine moonshine so much. It's, at the end of the day, it's a clear spirit. It's kind of like a vodka, kind of like a tequila. You mix it and drink it kind of like a tequila. But I started doing a few of these, tastings and stuff, or traveling, and hey, I'm Willie, I make Montana Moonshine, and you'd run into some guy from the South, and, well, man, that's pretty good, but that ain't real moonshine. You know that, right? And I was like, yeah, you're right, because I pay taxes on it.
Yeah.
Like, that's the definition
The
of
whole
moonshine.
idea was moonshine.
Is illegal
They pay for it.
alcohol. I pay taxes on it. It's legal. So you're right. It's not real moonshine.
It is an interesting alcohol from that standpoint, because all others, like to call it a Canadian whiskey or this kind of, it all has to have this massive list of what it can be. And with moonshine, it's just like, I don't know, how'd you make it? Okay, sure.
Yeah.
Right.
It's basically unaged whiskey.
Yep.
And then you basically take the same thing and you put it in the charred oak barrels, and you let it age, and then voila, you've got a whiskey.
Right.
And if you do it a certain way, you've got a bourbon.
It's lovely to me, though, that like adding on the honey one, because these are basically the same base, but the honey one is then add honey to it.
Well, the honey's different. The honey's,
Oh, it is different.
The honey's corn. It's a sweet.
Okay.
It's an old sweet feed recipe, which is fairly common back in the South or North Carolina. I had somebody call me out on that. Oh, one of my buddies from Louisiana, you know. Of course, those deep Southerner guys, they're like, North Carolina's not the South. And I was like, well, we were below the Mason-Dixon line. We thought we were Southern. You know, we're not as, you know, lower Alabama Southern. But it's an old sweet feed recipe, cob, corn, oats, barley, and then molasses. So we kind of threw a wrench into the ATF. So the ATF regulates everything we do. And that's the hardest thing we do is all this government regulation. It's lots of times it's a lot easier to make something than it is to get it legally into a bottle out. I mean,
Get it approved.
yeah, we come up with a new product, you know, we can make it 2 weeks, 6 months, whatever, but it'll take a year to get everything approved, the, you know, label approvals, the formulas. And so the adding molasses to those grains, anything that's grain based is whiskey. Once you add molasses is rum, like sugarcane molasses. So it's kind of a hybrid. It's got some rum qualities in it and some whiskey qualities in it and some moonshine qualities in it. And then so we corn, oats, barley, molasses, we mash, we ferment that, we distill it, and then it comes out clear. The honey moonshine looks just like the regular moonshine when it comes off the still. And then we put that in the barrels, and then we age it. And it's lightly aged, depending on what size of barrel we use, but anywhere from 6 months to a year. You know, some of them might be aged like 2 years. And then once we dump the barrel, then we add local raw honey to it from our friends over in Sheridan that have the Winsel apiary over there. So we add the honey last. That way we can control exactly how sweet it is. Because all that color from the honey moonshine isn't necessarily from the honey. It's from the barrels.
Okay.
Barrel aging. So the honey moonshine is different than the regular moonshine.
Do you have to? Are there 2 layers of regulations that you have to abide by at state and federal level?
Yeah.
Because each one.
Yeah, and underneath the ATF is the TTB, the Tax and Trade Bureau. So that's who we mostly talk to on the federal side, the Tax and Trade Bureau, and then the Montana Liquor Division, you know, in Helena regulates us as well. And they both regulate different things. You know, the state regulates like our tasting room and our building and stuff in Montana and what we can do, like our pour limits, how many bottles we can sell, yada yada. And on the federal side, they regulate the bottles and the labeling, and you know, every word on there has to be exact, and like the print, you know, the government warning and all the print has to be a certain size. And I mean, they can recall a whole batch just because I forget what the font size is. Let's just say it's 2 millimeters and it happens to be 1.9 millimeters. You know, they can recall 1,000 bottles or whatever if they wanted to. So they're pretty strict on that stuff.
Do you have some label on that? I would imagine even on the non-alcohol products, like your syrups and stuff like that, and barbecue sauce.
No,
because
the
it's
syrup
still
you're going through the FDA, and the Food and Drug Administration is, as we've seen during COVID,
right,
is actually way more strict, way more regulated, way more, however you want to put it, than alcohol is. When we started making hand sanitizer, something that a 5-year-old can put on their hands for COVID, the FDA was way more into us and strict about it, making hand sanitizer than making alcohol. And that really kind of opened up my mind with lobbyists and, you know, all that stuff. Because all of a sudden, or whoever it is, Johnson & Johnson and Perel and all these people couldn't keep up with making hand sanitizer.
Right.
So you had 2,000 distilleries overnight. It was like, hey, we can
make that.
sanitizer. It's pretty easy.
Right.
You know, just add Bitrix to it. So if a kid drinks it, you know, they automatically start puking or whatever. And it's, you know, some of that stuff was 40 to 60% alcohol. But you really seen the power of lobbyists and big business and corporations and, trying to shut you down, even though you're trying to help with the war effort, as we called it.
Well, it is interesting to me too that you said the TTB is state level, correct?
No, TTB is Tax and Trade Bureau. That's
is
they're an arm underneath the ATF that regulates alcohol and tobacco. The Tax and Trade Bureau.
That's interesting. It's even more interesting actually because we're Karen and I are both very much fascinated in the story behind Prohibition, and learning, of course, from a money economic standpoint, learning and understanding that the federal government had derived so much of its revenue base from liquor sales tax, and that when they were able to pass the 16th Amendment for basically revenue replacement, they allowed the Prohibition movement to carry forward and come into fruition through the 18th Amendment, but then they realized they needed more revenue, so hence the 21st Amendment, where they said, wait, we need to go back to letting people make and drink liquor so we can tax it again. And part of the condition of that was that the federal government said, well, we'll just let the states basically dictate at the state level what they want to do from a regulatory standpoint around their liquor laws, or that was my understanding anyway. So when you said TTB, I was assuming that tax agency, if you will, for lack of a better description, was at the state level, because they were like, well, we don't want to give up our tax revenue at the state level, but it's still a tax revenue at the federal level, just under the ATF. Right. So it's a little kind of behind the scenes.
Taxed, federally, and there's a couple taxes, stateside, like a liquor tax and I forget what all the taxes, but you got to stay up on them. The old saying, "Death and taxes." Like, sure. It's been tough. We've been taxes. In business, 13 years, and you got to account for every drop and every bottle, and it's very, it's some of the reports are weekly, some are every 2 weeks, some are monthly. But you've got to keep up on that, and that's one of the hardest things any distillery will tell you that they do is proofing down the bottles. You have to get that exact, and I won't go into that. I can talk about that for a while, but basically a bottle, 750 milliliter bottle, has to have 750 milliliters in it, not 749, not 751. If it's 40% alcohol, it has to be exactly 40% alcohol. It can't be 40.01 or 39.98. So that's all on taxes.
Right.
So they're very strict on that.
And because of the state levels too, because you're national and you sell nationally, you're here, but when you sell nationally, you have to kind of get
every
into
state,
the weeds
and
of
you
each
can't
of that.
just go nationally. It's go into another state is completely different.
You got to pull it in.
Utah is completely different than Montana. Idaho is completely than Pennsylvania.
Wow.
And you have to follow every state's rules and laws. For a distillery to say, hey, we're in all 50 states, and meaning they don't just have like one case in a state, but they're actually distributing in all 50 states. You have to be pretty darn big to do that. Real big. A lot bigger than us.
Yeah, that also that's an interesting unto itself, because even if you're controlled by 50 different basically deciders on what you can do with your business, I could see where that could be a real challenge to figure out, okay, well, from a growth model standpoint, we want to get out in more places, but
Pick and choose,
so I guess you really are kind of in a pick and choose
scenario. You run yourself ragged trying to follow all 50 state laws and shipping and trying to get those bottles there just to get to one liquor store or bar, and spent all this time and effort just to get 12 bottles into another state that doesn't make sense. So that's why we focus regionally, Montana, Wyoming, Idaho, a little bit in Washington, a little bit in Oregon, a little bit Utah, Colorado. And I mean, we're licensed in quite a few other states, Nevada and North Carolina, a few others. Every now and then we might send some cases or a pallet or something like that, but it's nothing big. And I don't want to go into this rabbit hole, but there's 19 control states, and then the other states are distributor states. So you still have to get licensed in every state. But the control states like Montana, Wyoming, Idaho, there's 19 of them. The state runs and accounts for and moves and ships and transports all the alcohol coming and going. So that's why Montana has state, I think there's something like 97 state liquor stores. They're franchise owned, but they're still state owned to a degree. And Idaho's liquor stores are definitely state owned, and like North Carolina is state owned.
A lot of those on the East Coast.
West Virginia.
Yeah, and most of your bigger,
definitely.
for whatever reason, your bigger cities like California, or bigger states, Texas, Florida, New York, California, they are distributor states. So private companies run the liquor in those states. So
And are those? I'm sorry for interrupting.
those are harder for us because we're competing against. We have to get a distributor to pick us up, and the big guys keep buying up the small guys. So you're getting bigger, and that's constantly moving, constantly changing. Who owns the distributorship now? And you might be doing good. Let's say you're doing awesome in Texas. For 2 or 3 years, you turn your head. Somebody else, a bigger company, bought that company out, and they're like, "What's this Willie stuff? Montana? We don't need no Montana stuff. Cut it out." They don't tell you. Turn your head, and they didn't sell anything for a year. Whereas the control states, we like control states because we know the state government also is going to pay you. We've had distributors take cases, pallets of your stuff, put it in the back warehouse just to kind of hide your stuff or sell it and not give you the money back or whatever. So we've kind of learned a lot of lessons. It's our first business. So but the state governments will eventually pay you, which is good. So the big guys, I just keep saying like Jack Daniels or Tito's or
ask
whoever,
you who was your biggest competitor.
they don't like the control states because they can't manipulate to a degree
Who's doing
the
what?
states.
Right.
Whereas private businesses, they can massage that and get their stuff in, there's just different ways that things happen, the way the money world works, as you guys know.
Yeah, for sure. I want to switch gears. I missed an opportunity to ask you a question about your Montana moonshine, and I wanted to come circle back to it because I'm just dying of curiosity. Why does it have a tequila smell to it?
Yeah, I don't know. It's corn and it's rye and it's barley, and we distill that, and we don't know why. It could, to me, it doesn't as much. I think some of it could be from people who haven't maybe drank a lot of moonshine.
Yeah, I don't smell the tequila. He was like, I smell tequila. I was like, I smell tequila.
The reason it doesn't taste a little bit, but to me it smells like moonshine.
Well, you said it. You use it in margaritas. Some people will use it as a margarita mix. So I was like, oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, I think a lot of Montanans, maybe people out west who didn't grow up
with moonshine,
Arkansas, North Carolina, Georgia, whatever. To me, it tastes like moonshine. That's not super high proof. It's only 90 proof, 45%. I mean, it's still pretty high. But the reason it doesn't taste like vodka is vodka's ran on your still a lot higher proof. It has to come off your still at like 95% alcohol, distilled multiple times, higher proof stuff. And then the reason vodka is not necessarily more smooth is it's charcoal filtered. By law, all vodkas in the world have to be charcoal filtered. So charcoal is an absorbent.
Yeah.
Picks up a lot of off flavors and stuff like that. So that's vodka. I think the ATF classifies vodka as like flavorless, odorless, like colorless, tasteless. Like vodka is just, in theory, almost supposed to taste like water.
Like literally just
with
be alcohol.
Yeah.
Alcohol like water.
But if we were to charcoal filter our Montana moonshine, it would probably taste more like a vodka, and you wouldn't have that, tequila like flavor.
Okay, I have a confession to make. I blamed your salesman Dave for putting the tequila in my head because he made the comment when he was talking about when he goes around to trade shows.
Yeah, we do tastings.
Yeah,
and
tastings,
trade shows, and
and he likes to put the moonshine out on his display table, and it makes people smell it or taste that. I'm not sure, but he made the comment about the tequila, and it obviously lodged in my brain because then it's that power of suggestion. So he said that, and so like I poured this, and as soon as I took it, as soon as I could smell, I was like, that smells like tequila. So I don't know if
Yeah.
it actually does, or that's just Dave's influence coming out of my brain.
It does. I do smell it, but it's
me.
not as.
I smell
Still
moonshine.
smells like moonshine to me, but I
Yeah.
can get where people
Yeah.
think that it's just maybe a little bit more earthy than vodka, but it's not. There's no agave plant in it or anything.
It is as far as like drinkability, like moonshine. So my family's roots are West Virginia.
Yeah.
And
Same thing.
so, yeah, and I
Mountain
have
people.
my true moonshine.
Yeah,
And and that, the harshness of it, when I first was like, wait, moonshine and not have a mixer? I'm not sure about this, but it is actually like definitely something you can, and definitely because it's more flavorful, like if you did choose to use it as a mixer, what you wanted to cut it with could be
Yeah,
much more
moonshine
mild.
margaritas are awesome.
Yeah, it sounds
Moonshine
good.
mules, you know,
Yep.
they're pretty good.
Well, this is awesome. I really appreciate you going into so much depth around the product. That's the moonshine doing that to my lips. But I wanted to get an opportunity, if you're okay with it, is to just to ask you a couple additional questions that maybe aren't so much product related, just more kind of more broader, bigger picture questions. Yeah. So, and actually, I've asked both Karen and Pam to also share a question with you as well, just to try to kind of get a variety of different questions for you. So, you want to start, Pam?
I will. Well, first of all, I want you to know that I had your hand sanitizer in my little store over on Main Street, Whitehall.
Yeah, that's cool. Thanks for getting that. And we charged a little bit to cover some of the bills. We gave a lot. I mean, there are hospitals all over the country calling from everywhere. Atlanta.
Yeah.
We had to focus on like Madison County, our first responders, fire, law enforcement, hospitals, nursing homes. So we gave quite a bit away, rightfully so. But then we had to pay for some of our costs, so we did sell some.
It was,
to
it was a
grocery stores and
really
other
great
places.
price, and actually, I had it in my store, and people loved it that it was local and locally made. I thought that was so cool.
great.
Instead of
Yeah,
mass
it's cool.
produced.
Thanks for carrying it.
Yeah. So your distillery is more about whiskey, more than whiskey, like community and honoring your heritage. And what does legacy mean to you, and how do you try to build it through your spirits?
Yeah, I think, just like John was saying, every bottle's got a story. I mean, we have our own story. Me and Robin had our own story. I have my story, and I'm continuously building our story with our employees and new people that come on board, and we've just always had a sense of community in Ennis. And I grew up in a small town, so I get that atmosphere and family like atmosphere. And there's gonna be fights in any family, but you got to work through things. But just Ennis, in Madison County, our town, our state, everything's been pretty darn good. Everybody's really supported us. And so we try to give back too in a lot of different ways. And some of our bottles we give back. It'll say on the bottle there's certain ways we give back, but we do quite a bit. Do a lot of donations and things like that. And just never started the distillery to be veteran based. It was me and Robin, and it's husband and wife team, and there's two of us, and the federal government and state of Montana, nobody will let you do 50-50. You got to do either 51 or 49. One person has to be. So we looked at it both ways. Is it better for us? Is it more advantageous for us to be a woman-owned distillery at 51% or veteran-owned distillery? And it turned out that there were more perks and advantages at that time.
Veterans.
Yeah, that's how we got our first. It's essentially a 7 Alpha, 7A loan from the SBA, but it was a good chunk of change. I mean, it wasn't everything that we needed, everything that we got, but that helped us get our business going. And then naturally my past starts coming out. Oh, Willie played Army, and he was a Ranger and SF guy and jumped out of airplanes, So now we've kind of started, I've started to embrace that a little bit more, because guys start bringing me patches and all kinds of cool stuff from
It's probably one of the
wars
most
and-
important things. I mean, it really is. Like,
but that never was,
the focus.
the focus. Yeah, it was
Yeah.
family. It was family owned, and that was, we were trying to find a way to make a living doing something that we thought we could be good at and retire with, honestly.
Yeah.
Well, actually, the makes me think of so to go into a little bit more detail about your distillery, the building itself in Ennis. We were just there. My wife and I and some other folks were there recently, and in your tasting room. The cool thing about your tasting room is it really is it's set up so well as like a community gathering place, and the thing that I've noticed about it the handful of times I've been in there is you've got people in there from all over, all walks of life, locals mixing with tourists and but it feels like that when people walk into that tasting room, like if somehow, some weird way, there's something weird, like in a good way, like there's kind of a magic in that tasting room where everybody kind of feels like they're all part of the same community because you've done such a good job of inviting them into that community. And then what we learned just the last time we were there, which was super cool, and I appreciated your bartender sharing this with us. By the way, new hire of yours, he did great. He was
nice.
He was Jordan. He did a fantastic job. But he was explaining to us when you walk in the door and you go up to the bar, and then you turn around and you look back at the wall, that the door you just came in from the main street. You look from left to right, and it tells the original story of what of what Willie's was when you started. And then the rest of the room kind of became more of a shrine to the military and veterans
because
and
of what
special
people
forces,
have brought into the flavor.
Cowboys and Western heritage, we got a lot of that in there too.
But just like all of the the gifted patches, and that all have such great meaning and and color to them, and the coins and the all the memorabilia. It's like, I mean, anybody that has the opportunity to go to Ennis, Montana, and step foot in this tasting room,
for sure,
should not pass it up, because it is you guys have done such a fantastic job on setting that up and making it such a wonderful spot. It's really great.
Appreciate it.
Yeah.
It's just a shame I can only have 2 drinks there.
Oh, I know. That's a Montana thing. That's not a federal thing. That's just Montana.
Really? So two drink minimum.
2 ounces specifically.
Yep.
Okay.
And then we used to only could sell 2 bottles per person per day. Now we can sell 6. So that's huge. I mean, we're in a tourist town, so we get quite a few people coming through, tourists. Our locals support us. They'll come in and maybe have a drink or 2 and bring their friends in. A lot of people meet down there to show off or show their friends and family the town, and what our spots is one of the places they bring people to.
I've been over
so
there.
Is there a cool loophole where if you buy a bottle you can drink it there?
Outside you can.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, no, because
on the roof or no?
Yeah, Ennis doesn't have an open container law, so you can
go outside and do whatever.
Sidewalks, yeah.
Yeah.
So is that town to town? Because I think
open container is town. Town
Whitehall
and also county. It depends.
Whitehall does.
And Red Lodge, you can't. If you even step on the sidewalk in Red Lodge with a drink in your hand, they can give you a ticket.
Right. Butte is all actually open container. At least it was a couple of years ago. Yeah. Billings is, at least it was too. But that is town to town.
So that means Butte, you can go with an open container.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay,
Now that's funny about Red Lodge, because
that is funny.
Willie, I don't know if you remember this, if you were ever around in Red Lodge back in the 90s, but I remember being at the Snow Creek Saloon.
I was going to say Snow Creek Saloon.
And it was not like that one.
In the same night, 2 things happened that was just one of my favorite experiences in Montana. Out on the dance floor on probably a Saturday night, hooping and hollering, ripping it up, and 2 different things happened. First of all, a guy comes in the front door on his motorcycle, drives through the Snow Creek, across the dance floor and out the back door. Yeah. And then before the night was over, somebody rides their horse into the Snow Creek and it crossed the dance floor and out the back door. And I was like, I love Montana.
Yeah, Denny just rode her horse into the distillery last month. It's super big horse, huge horse. She could barely fit under the door. But we've had a few horses come in.
Oh, wow.
Who was this that did this?
Denny, a friend of ours in Ennis.
That's fun.
There's been a couple other people that have ridden their horses in, and I don't care. Some people get a little upset, but
you know what? There's not a lot to get upset
speaking
about.
of Red Lodge and Snow Creek, that was one of the first bars I went to, and I came to Montana, and like winter, or I came out here like 95 a couple times with a buddy that grew up in Red Lodge, and then I'd go back to 3rd Ranger Battalion in Georgia. But we came out one winter, and the snow's piled, 8 feet tall on the side of the roads, and so you'd drink at the snow creek, and then vehicles coming down the main street, it's just snow. You'd grab on the back of the tailgates, we call it hooky bobbing.
Yep.
And they'd just take you up and down the street.
Who needs a
wherever you
taxi?
needed to go. Yeah, it's pretty fun.
Yeah.
I was like, well, when I get out of the Army, I want to move here. It's cool.
Yeah. I was born in Red Lodge.
Oh, I
nice.
didn't know that.
Yeah, that's where I was born. Yep.
Oh, that's very
Beautiful
exciting.
place. Yeah.
It is.
Yeah. So it's not as nice as Ennis.
I don't think so.
No. We have to say that, right?
They don't have a whiskey distillery.
Right.
Right.
No.
Or Shedhorn Sports.
Right.
Okay,
right.
so actually that opens the door to another question, not planned, but how did you actually end up picking Ennis? Was it because of the water there, the lime?
That was mostly my late wife Robin's family. She had an uncle that lived there, and they had a place, and we were living in Stevensville, Florence area, because I was smoke jumping out of Missoula.
Right.
And, we don't like living in the city, so we're living, Stevensville, Florence, outside of there. And we were actually looking at starting our distillery like Stevensville or Florence. And then we kind of looked at Butte. We started having kids. So most of Robin's family she grew up in Townsend. So a lot of her family at the time were like in Butte, Townsend area, a few people in Ennis. So then we started looking, hey, Butte and Townsend area. And then we started looking at Ennis. And actually I was wanting to do our distillery in Pony. Just because I liked Pony,
I love Pony.
super small town,
Yeah.
and because we weren't looking at a tasting room or any of that stuff. We were looking at making bottles and distributing it. And the thing that kept sticking in the back of my head, well, Jack Daniel's, one of the world's largest distilleries, is in a population of 270 people, Lynchburg, Tennessee.
Right.
How did they do that? I know there's other people around there now, but that was our thought on it, was just straight up distribution. We severely underestimated how many people would come to us for the tasting room experience and that sort of deal. So I'm glad we picked Ennis over Pony. We got lucky with the Main Street building on the sidewalk. But her uncle got her a job at the bank, and my first job in Ennis was I was building our little first house ever built, couple blocks from Main Street. And because one of my buddies told me, he's like, "Will, you've been a ranger, you've been a Green Beret, you've been a smoke jumper, hot shot guy." He's like, "You're not a man until you've built your own house." And he was just kind of joking with me, but that always stuck in the back of my head.
You took it as a challenge.
So fun.
Yeah.
You
So when I had a
down the
chance
gauntlet.
to build my own house, I did, and I was like,
Wow.
"Man, it's probably one of the hardest things I've ever done."
Yeah.
So I started working at the sewer.
Not harder than creating a distillery, though, I'm
No,
sure.
that's still at the top of the list.
Or jumping into a forest fire, or perfectly,
Well, I don't
jumping
know,
out of a
Sam,
perfectly
that
good
was fun,
plane,
yeah.
or
Those things are all easy when you're kind of bred for that. or
Adrenaline
you're used to
junkie,
doing that sort of stuff. I'm not saying they're easy, but that stuff came more natural. Being an entrepreneur, starting up a business, was not natural for me. Still learning a lot. I mean, it's definitely the hardest thing I've ever done, and probably because it wasn't physical. I couldn't just muscle my way through it. You got to like think your way through it. So it hurts my head.
Well, it's interesting because that, my question is about, freedom, massive word, right? And there's so many ways to unpack it. Being in the financial industry, I very often think of financial freedom, but it is so many ways, our personal freedoms, our whatever, and there's both sides of that. So what is this done for you as far as on either side that you want to talk about, but on the positive side of getting to have a different life for your family or a different thing that your community and that brought in, and also if you want to on the other side of where you're getting hampered because of whatever it happens to be,
under more scrutiny, because of the putting
but
yourself
what
out
that
there.
means to you in your life and what you're doing with Willie's, just that word. And what
Yeah, I
that
think
ties in.
it's I think we obviously started our business, for ourselves. We're looking at, how are we going to provide for our family? I think that's what most people are doing anywhere in the world today.
Yeah.
Most decent people, and we know there's some evil people out there, but besides those people, most people are just trying to make a living and provide for their family and live their lives and be as free as they can. And that's what we were trying to do. We just really, I could have had an awesome career in the military. I was always doing the right things and moving progress-wise in the right direction. I could have stayed, wildland firefighting, government contracting, other things. But we wanted to live in Montana, and we wanted to live in a small town and raise our kids, and that worked out. Our girls were K through 5 at Ennis High School, and we call it Whoville. There's no other, very few places like Ennis, or Whitehall or other, other small town Montana towns that your kids can walk to school. You don't have to worry about a lot of things. And everybody in the community, we always police our own. If there's some riffraff going on or whatever, we don't necessarily wait for the law enforcement. I mean, we'll call law enforcement, but we just, people get ostracized or like, hey, we don't do this in Ennis.
Right.
You
like that's not acceptable.
You go to that person's house and you put a 3-7-77 on their door.
No,
like the vigilantes.
Yeah, it probably worked though. But people just know. People still blows a lot of my buddies' minds. They're like, "What do you mean you don't lock your house or you don't lock your truck?" I'm not telling everybody. Not everybody does that, but there's lots of times, that doesn't happen. Just
so one of the kind of bringing things to a close here. I do have 2 more questions. When we're in this New Frontier show that we're doing, we are trying to draw that parallel between the old frontier, the new frontier, the traits of the old pioneers that settled the old frontier. I identify them as resilience, self-reliance, grit, vision, and community. Yeah. And in trying to apply those same traits, characteristics to the modern pioneer, the new frontier, of those characteristics, resilience, self-determination, self-reliance, grit, vision, and community. Is there any one in particular that you think resonates with you the most as far as helping you kind of establish or build your entrepreneurial mindset, and what gave you the real birth of Willie's to branch out away from the security of the government job with the military?
Yeah, I think all of those definitely resonate. I mean, you've definitely got to have, resilience, and I would add, like perseverance and just the no quit attitude. And then having, you said vision, I believe, having that vision and then following through with that and being determined, being 100%, like we're all in. And that's just the way I was wired from a long time ago. And my late wife, Robin, she was obviously wired that way too. But I mean, we should have, and we could have quit 10 times over. A lot of smarter people than us told us you should quit now, and we didn't. We kept finding a way to continue the mission and make things happen, and we're in a pretty good spot right now. We're doing good, and we're plugging away, got an awesome team, awesome community, and we keep, trying to grow a little bit every year and push the envelope a little bit. But it took a lot of hard work, that thing of, you gotta, most 90% of businesses fell within the first 3 to 5 years or whatever. I think that's true. And they say the Montana rule is 10 years or something like that. Like if you've got to make it like 10 years before you can be like, okay, I think we got this. I think we've made it. And I don't know why they say that in Montana, but I've heard that from a few people. So we're about 13 years into it.
Because we're grittier, that's why.
Yeah.
We're going to hang in there longer.
I can make stupid decisions all day long and be out of business tomorrow, Right. But I just out working, just working, 100-hour work weeks, 120-hour, whatever it was. And I'd come off, I worked almost 3 to 4 years straight in Afghanistan or Iraq before we got our business going in 2012, just to save up enough money to get our business going. So we had a lot of stuff on the line. Everything was on the line. This fails, you lose your little house that you built by your hands. You lose everything, and you got to start over. And I knew what that meant. Okay, going back in the military or whatever. I loved the military. I mean, I had fun at all those places. I excelled there, but just a lot of it was this military mindset of don't quit and just try to keep working and outworking everybody. And I think that paid off. There's kind of two sayings with being a ranger. There's smart ranger and there's strong ranger. I was definitely strong ranger back in the day, but I think I evolved a little bit more into the smart ranger, which you have to if you're going to run a business.
Yeah, is that the adage, work smarter, not harder?
Yeah.
Because at some point that's got to take over, especially
100%.
Especially once we start getting a little bit longer in the tooth. Like you can't run the way that you did when you were 20, 30 years old. All right, this is Willie. This is so awesome. Appreciate it so much. This is my parting question for you, and then we will release you back into the wilds of Montana. If you could time travel and give your younger self one piece of advice, knowing now what it takes to build something like an award-winning distillery in a small rural community, what would that be? And it is true. You've won many awards with your distillery, haven't you?
Yeah, we have. Yeah.
Yeah. Which is kudos to you. That's awesome.
Yeah, kudos to my team and everybody around me. And I think that's one of the smart things is realizing you can't do everything and hire people that are better than you, hire people that are smarter than you, and don't be intimidated with that.
Wow. Yeah.
You know.
Yeah. So is that the advice, actually? That actually works well, doesn't it?
Yeah, I think so. Like, advice to my old self. Yeah, just, I don't know, maybe be a little bit more smarter about it. But the question was, what would I give my younger self?
Yeah, one piece of advice you give your younger self, knowing what you know now.
Well, make sure you have enough money to get started, get going. I mean, literally, our first batch of Moonshine, we had our still in place. Everything was in place. Everything's on the line. Day one, we're out of money. And I didn't really know because Robin kind of ran the money. And Katie, my wife now, she's our CFO, and she's taken the bull by the horns of the distillery and helping run things and do a lot of stuff at the distillery, which is awesome now. And she controls a lot of the aspects on that. I've never been the money guy. I understand it. I've got to have my finger on it. But I was like, well, I'm going to go down the Harrison elevator because I knew that was the closest place to Ennis that had corn. And I was like, I'm going to go get a bunch of corn and come back and make some moonshine. And I said, which checkbook do you want me to use or debit card? And she's like, well, we ain't got any money. And I was like, how are we going to make moonshine if we can't get no corn? But it was like an eye opener, like literally day one. We weren't even opened,
Well, that's the crazy thing about distilling. I mean, it does take time, even if you're making moonshine and not aging it. I mean, there's time and everything.
And then like the Harrison elevator, Montana has like yellow dent filled corn, and a lot of that had a lot of husks, and it was kind of dirty. It's good for feed cattle and stuff like that.
Right.
Those guys are kind of looking at me and Pat Goggins, some of the guys I used to get corn with, and Ennis, and I'm sure they were looking at me like, man, who's this redheaded freckle-faced kid named Willie? Thinks he's going to make moonshine out of this dirty corn. Turns out you really can't. You need to get some real good white sweet corn, which I knew that, but I guess I had to do it to prove to myself, like, yep, got to have real good corn.
Yeah. Because Robin and her family they were
farmers.
They
were wheat farmers, barley farmers, rye farmers. So she had all the grain connections, a lot of grain connections in Montana. And, I knew how to make the stuff, at least, rudimentary. And so things just lined up. I think it was just fate in a lot of ways.
Do your kids have an involvement in that?
They work a little bit. Josie works at the distillery. She likes giving tours some, during the summer. They're both going to MSU right now. So Josie you only have to be 18 to work behind the bar. So she's 20, and so she'll help with that. She'll help with some events. She likes giving tours, because she can talk about her mom and the distiller and everything. And then Ruby helps us some of that. And Ruby does a lot of our graphic designs and graphic design and marketing and stuff like that. That's what she's going to school for.
Has she designed a label yet?
She's helped.
Yeah.
She helps with flyers, and she's a big part of a lot of our stuff that
That's
we
cool.
do. So it's, and we'll just see where it goes.
Right.
You know, I don't know if it's going to continue to be family run, 20 years from now or what.
Right.
You know?
But it was nice
Not
because
gonna-
it gave you that opportunity when they were growing up to have more of that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they've always been around it.
Yeah.
Right.
They've seen the good.
Again, like you
the good
said,
and the
much
bad
like
side
you did.
I was
of,
gonna
it-
say.
Yeah.
of the business, and
Yeah.
then specifically alcohol.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Their dad and his buddies talking war stories. I'm sure they've heard every war story under the sun.
Well, one of the we might have to see if we can get you back for one of our other shows that we do called Flip the Flow, where a very big part of that is really talking about the trying to solve the issue of where if lack of capital or access to capital is an issue for small businesses and entrepreneurs, there are ways to solve that problem that aren't quite as conventional as going down to your local banker and begging for for another operational loan or line of credit or whatever. So if you ever have any interest in in delving into another type of conversation, a little bit different, it could be really fun as well. Just very different than this one, but
sure.
There's God bless the small businesses and entrepreneurs like yourself in this country, and again, just thank you so much for coming in and appreciate it very much.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, I would like to say to you, thank you for your service, obviously, to the country.
Yeah.
Thank you for your
Thank
service
you
as a
guys.
smoke jumper, because firemen are God bless you people. And thank you for your service now of
Yeah.
giving us all wonderful,
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
wonderful
Here's to success.
distilled grains.
Awesome.
Thank you guys.
Now I gotta run back to Montana. I had my fun.